Funky Politics.
And we're back with Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. Our in-studio guest today, we're delighted to have with us. She is the president of The Works Incorporated. Her life work is making communities better, and her name is Roshun Austin. We're glad you're in the studio with us today.
Thank you.
We're going to be talking about, well, gentrification.
Let me stop. Let me stop you right. Let me stop you right here.
Okay.
Let me tell you something, Brownie. You're doing a hell of a job. Brownie. But this particular episode was inspired by my alma mater and the challenges that they're facing right now. Howard University, of course, as you know, is located, for those who don't know, located in Washington, D.C. in the historic Shaw neighborhood. Not Southeast, it's Northwest.
It's Northwest.
It's Northwest. Upper Northwest. Shaw neighborhood. No, it's not Southeast, but big up Santa Costa, big up Santa Costa, okay? But anyway.
It's somewhere in the district.
This neighborhood has undergone, over the last, I would say probably 20 years, a major redevelopment overhaul. So the way Howard looked when I went to school is a little bit different than the way it looks now. And I think it's to the good and the benefit of the school, because we didn't have a lot of the amenities that they have now with the neighborhood, but there are some downsides as well. And one of the things they're facing now is that there are a number of residents that are not of the traditional Howard student ilk. Should I say it that way?
The colonizers have arrived.
Okay. See, I wasn't gonna say it that way, but I guess you could say that. And they're bringing their dogs, and their dogs are walking on our
cholera.
Yeah. And they're at all of that on our historic campus, and they're turning the yard into the park.
And you can't play house music at the T-Mobile shop on the corner.
Now, the only dogs I want to see on the yard.
Go.
No. It was
the
go.
only dogs I want to see on the yard.
Oh, here we go.
The only dogs I want, the only dogs I want to see on the yard are my brothers.
But it brings up a good question, though.
It
right?
brings up a good question because there are a number of African American or historically black colleges and universities that are in neighborhoods across the nation, that the neighborhoods are having major transformations. They have been, these neighborhoods for a while, no one cared about them. They were dilapidated. Once upon a time, they're some of the greatest places to live. They went down. People came in, redeveloped them, but now we have this whole cultural clash. So we're talking about two things today: gentrification and
cultural displacement.
Displacement. So we brought the expert, someone I've worked with in community development for years. I won't say how many, but almost 20. Started when she was only 2 years old.
Probably more than 20, and I started when I was.
Well, I was trying to give you some up. Yeah, started when she was in vitro. We've been doing this thing together. So why don't you talk to us just a little bit about this whole issue of gentrification, so the listeners can understand where we're going and what we're talking about here.
So I say that people often are misinformed, and they think of gentrification as cultural displacement. They think they're one and the same. And often gentrification happens with cultural displacement. And so gentrification means that appraised values of properties are going up, incomes are going up, and people have more educational attainment. So they get bachelor's degrees from having high school diplomas or no high school diploma. Well, cultural displacement can be a part of that. It's something different. Mm-hmm. And so it's not being able to play the go-go music from the T-Mobile shop that you played for the last 20 years or 25 years. Right. Or it's a historically black college or university located in a place that's been for over 100 years. Right. And not being able to celebrate the culture that they've been celebrating that entire time because people now want to bring their dogs.
Their culture. The tenets of their culture.
Their mayo.
Right.
And their cucumber sandwiches to the campus.
So this is kind of like not being able to barbecue in the park. It's barbecue.
Not unless you're barbecuing skewers with tomatoes and other things.
Well, no, you can't use charcoal. You need to use, some type of wood.
So let me, and you're listening to the Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. Let me just kind of break this whole gentrification thing down for just a second. Most people, when you talk about gentrification, they think that, okay, you have depressed property values. People come in and invest. Either they build up the homes that are there, or they build new construction, which brings the property value up. People with money come in and buy, and that begins to change the neighborhood.
And the people that are there don't have the money to stay.
The people that are there don't have the money there to either buy the new homes or buy the new homes or pay the taxes, and so they have to move somewhere else. Am I getting close to that?
And all of those things are definitely true with gentrification, yes.
Okay. But a lot of the times, okay, so if we talk about cultural displacement, we talk about who the people who are buying those homes, in some cases, moving into the neighborhood and changing the cultural complexion of the neighborhood.
Yes, and the prime example is Harlem.
Yeah.
Yes.
When Clinton moved in, what we knew as a historically African-American community in New York City became something else.
And I don't know why, because he's the first black president.
Okay.
We're going to keep moving on.
Yes, I won't go there.
And that is what is known as radio silence right now.
We're going to keep moving on.
That's what we call dead air.
But I will make the argument, right? My parents live in the same neighborhood that I was born and raised in, 3 blocks. So 1 block from 0 to 3, the next block, literally on the next street from 3 to 14. And then finally were able to purchase a home when I was 14. At a time when there were houses on that block, family members, folk own those houses. And if I fast forward that to today, my mom's house and our neighbors are the only house on that entire block. Right?
Wow.
Blight, displacement, and I there's nobody's displacing them. Like, so I am one of those people who's like, can we build some houses? Can we get some gentrification going on? Because I need my mother's property to do something, because the key to my mother and father building wealth or having the capacity to build wealth is the value increasing in their home.
Yeah.
So how do we battle?
Yes, in neighborhoods that have seen decline over the last 4 decades or 5 decades since really the riots. And so I think people forget, so we have to look at history.
Sure.
And so and I understand when African Americans are talking about gentrification, there's fear because there are some policies at a federal level that have impacted us.
Right.
Urban renewal. And so that was a federal policy. Academics came up with the concept, and they decided to destroy neighborhoods.
We're not going to even say what the slang was for urban renewal, what they really
No, we won't say.
Yeah.
But also, we've also been subjected, even prior to urban renewal policy, to terrorist acts. And so it's true that African Americans, and I can say in my grandmother's generation, that there were people that I knew, my grandmother's aunt, they lost their homes to terroristic acts.
Such as?
Go on, get real with it.
The Ku Klux Klan put them out of their towns.
You can
burn their houses down.
They burned or threatened them.
Down.
They took their land and they left town. They left the entire state. Right. And so there's some history there.
Rosewood was not a fictitious story.
It was not a fictitious story. Neither was Black Wall Street in Omaha.
Right.
Greenwood, in Tulsa.
Right, in Tulsa.
Yes. Yeah. And so none of that was untrue. And so we have some history there. And it's not that long ago. Right. It's 20th century.
Right.
And so I understand where it's coming from, but as Tosha was saying, it's, how do you get
Tulsa, Oklahoma, I forgot about that.
Greenwood, how do you get appraised values on your mother's street? Right now, it costs, I always say it costs, sticks and bricks cost the same thing no matter where you build them. So if it costs $120,000, today those appraisals are probably $40,000, $30,000. Who's going to take the loss? And so we want to see gentrification. So we need to have infrastructure improvements in the streets.
But when you say you want to see gentrification, so people understand, we want to see the increase in the neighborhood values. We want to see the neighborhood come up.
Yes.
We want to see it get off of
developed.
Yeah, we want to see it get off the fact that just because there's a Martin Luther King Boulevard down the street, you're saying, oh, this is going to be despair. This is going to be something that's going to be prosperous. You don't have those places where you go, this is where certain people live and certain other people live.
Yes.
You want the neighborhood to come up.
Because then we're really talking about wealth among African American families. And I say that's erroneous, that African Americans have not experienced wealth and home ownership because the policies prevent that from happening. In Memphis alone, we've seen during the foreclosure crisis, 18% drops in home ownership among African Americans. And then if we had products that in the 90s, during the Clinton administration, they created 110% LTV, loan to value. Right. How is that wealth if I go in upside down?
Absolutely.
Historically, we don't have a lot of wealth that we pass on. And so we don't have 20% to bring to the table. So I don't go in at 80% loan to value.
You are listening to The Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Roshun, I had this question for you. So it seems like, everybody at the table here is agreeing that in these impoverished neighborhoods, we want to see the circumstances change.
Right.
Right? And at the same time, you mentioned that cultural displacement can kind of come with that. It seems kind of like I want it, but I don't want it. I want things to change because I want more money and more opportunities flowing in the hood. But in order for that to happen, more people got to come in. And if the people come in, that's going to change my neighborhood, but I don't want my neighborhood to change. It seems like on some level, it seems like how do you have it both ways?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is policy. So we we have people that look like us that are in seats where they help to control policy at the local and the state level. And so how do you put restrictive deeds or covenants in to protect the people who have remained? And I always say in my community development work, I first love the people who have stayed there for whatever reason, whether they could not leave or they just didn't want to leave. They were tied to their neighborhood. And so I'm going to show them love by protecting them. Right. But then at the same time, I'm going to provide them with amenities that you can get anywhere. Why shouldn't they be able to walk their streets and have pedestrian-friendly streets? If they don't own an automobile, why is that their only option? Why should we force them to live in a suburb when they're in the middle of the city? Why shouldn't they have access to food and whatever type of food they want to eat? And so we shouldn't make them choose what we think they should have. We should not subject them to that because they don't have much wealth. And so why shouldn't they have great infrastructure, paved roads, parks, so they have free space? And they probably need it more than the middle income or the higher income because they can't go on vacation.
But it sounds
they can't
to me
pick
like,
up and go.
Like what you're saying essentially, though, is that we're going to have more communities that are established by us.
Established by us, but they need to be
they
need to be comprehensive.
Right.
And so we don't need to build suburban communities where you live 10 miles apart from your neighbor with no sidewalks. That's not what we need to build.
Right.
We need to honor all of our neighbors, even those who don't own automobiles, whatever their income. They need to look like the historic African American neighborhoods of the past where the physician lived next door to the janitor.
How was it able to happen back then and it can't happen now? Because a lot of those houses were built by African-American builders.
I got in trouble for that in graduate school.
Well, we're going to get you there again.
But it's the funky politics.
So you're in trouble in high school, but you're just funky
we get in
right
trouble
now.
on this
so
show.
talk about why can't we do that?
Because I seem to be against integration, and so there was some failings of integration.
Okay, keep talking, please.
Our middle class left. They moved too. And I said that, I experienced that when I was working in Orange Mound and we had Section 8 housing, for instance.
Sure.
And these were the days of when Uptown was just being developed after Hurt Village was demolished in Lauderdale Courts. And I would have people call and they were looking for Section 8 homes.
Right.
And I'd say Orange Mound Development Corporation. And they say, do you have houses in Hickory Hill? Because mentally, they were looking for what was better.
Right.
But it was better 20 or 30 years ago.
Right.
Now it has deferred maintenance. And so, honey, they have moved on to Collierville.
Sure.
You're late moving to Hickory Hill.
Or Knoxville.
And so we didn't talk, or somewhere, somewhere else.
Right.
We didn't talk about the value and the importance of our neighborhoods, our institutions.
Right.
And we didn't see those as assets. We bought it. They sold us on that. And the trends change in cities. Think about cities.
Yes.
American cities. And you go to the oldest city. You had the millionaire and the mansions in Midtown. And they had factories nearby and the factory workers. So they had workforce housing.
Right.
Even in plantations.
Right.
The workforce housing was just back, down the road.
Right.
Where they can get to it. So the trend was then they built the suburbs after the war.
Right.
But then they started to move back in again, probably after the 80s or 90s. After the 60s in major cities.
The new urbanism concept.
Yes, this whole new urbanism. But after 68, we saw riots after King's assassination. And so
it's what turned Georgetown, once a black community, go back to D.C. Once a black community, Georgetown was, because the Jesuits came to Georgetown to save the black folk. So that's where they lived. But after King was assassinated, and they tore up Georgetown. They tore it to the ground. Like we did, black people did. All of a sudden, the communities changed.
And they eliminated anything that had been black.
Yep. Except the basketball team.
Funky Politics on the KUDZUKIAN Network.